welcome back to Breaking Views, where Anthony Onesto, my good friend and co-host, and I, Theresa Fesinstine, talk about all of the crazy things that are happening in breaking news across human resources, people and culture, organizations, AI, technology. And I'm so excited to chat this week. What do we want to talk about? What do we want to get into?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, I'm looking at my LinkedIn profile. I'm looking at all the things that I've sent to you, thousands of links here. I mean, well, first and foremost, I mean, the most breaking, if we're going to go breaking news, this morning, the US, they reported gained 172,000 jobs in May, doubling Wall Street estimates. Doubling, not like, and this is fascinating to me. This is what I love. Well, first and foremost, like all the snake oil salespeople, AI taking jobs. And by the way, unemployment stuck at 4.3. Now, here's my asterisk on all of this. There's real frustration in the job market. There are struggles with college entry, folks not finding jobs. I did a session, I think we talked about this last time, with Bottomless Closet, which is a charity for women here in New York, where I taught them how to use Claude there's a real, and I talked to one of their community members right after. I'm open. I'm like, here, reach out to me. Here's my email if I could be helpful. And she was like, Iowa grad, that just is struggling, can't find a job, just really for a year now. So there's really, really issues. And it's just this sort of unwavering kind of imbalance that's happening. But I love that people were like, yeah, AI is taking jobs and jobs aren't being created. And all these PhD chief economists that are like, yep, we're not going to see jobs in May. And then the US economy was like, hold my beer. Here's 172 jobs. We're doubling what the Wall Street folks. And the first thing I thought about was all that stuff that I just talked about, but also all these really smart people that sat in school for a decade, getting their PhD in economics and being frickin' wrong again. What is it like? What? And again, I understand that these things are volatile and things, policy changes and all that sort of stuff. But here we are, this, job apocalypse kind of thing that people have been talking about, just not real in May. And so I just find it fascinating how resilient. Now, the report does state that the highest growth was in leisure. So, it's obviously summertime, people going away, experience. Healthcare continues. And I'm of two minds around healthcare job growth. It's like if we are continuing to need more and more healthcare people, that means we're unhealthy. Okay, we could talk about that. And then local government was the third element. So still tech sector, not doing a lot of work here. But I think it just proves that, this equation that I've been talking about, it is people and machines. It is people and machines. Let's stop, the BS, and let's just start planning better strategies around how we're implementing AI with people next to it. So that's my TED
It's
Talk for today. No,
That's my hot take. So
that's my take.
interesting hot take, because here's my hot take on that is I'm getting to the point where I trust anything in the media news cycle in the same way that I trust a meteorologist. And that is that I feel like most of the time they're doing like this, 172,000 jobs. And part of the reason I feel that way is, number one, what you mentioned, Anthony, about, the job market. I'm talking to people that are struggle busing for a year and a half, looking for a job, getting ghosted, not finding anything. And it really makes me wonder, number one, I do think that there are a lot of, I don't even know if there's a term for this, you might know it, but jobs that aren't real jobs, but people are trying to build up their own repository of saying we have this many candidates, or we have this many resumes on file, or this is our repository of talent that you can pull from, that are getting that data from false roles. I have to think some of that is happening because of the volume of people I've heard talk about, hey, I really am struggling. I'm not sure what to do anymore. I have reached out to all of my contacts. I'm not getting responses. And then I saw a really great post the other day on part of the challenge with the hiring process is that, as I think we all in talent understand, that there's really three or four, if even that, major players in the um, aggregator business of handling and managing resumes and, you know, triaging them for roles. And how with some of the companies it was uncovered, I don't know if you saw this, but how with certain companies it was uncovered that because people are going into those systems for different roles, oftentimes it's caching the scorecard or the report card for an individual for one role across any role that they apply for a
Ah,
365-day period. And so while I may not be the right talent for this one particular role that I applied for and that got me into the system, it's giving me the same report card essentially across the next 10
oh,
jobs
that
I
is
may apply for.
so dumb. Like,
And so maybe
yeah,
that's a piece of this. Like, it's not that companies are ghosting you, but as we start to integrate technology, I think that's one of the important topics to talk about is people are getting so much there's so much self-imposed pressure on people to be using the shiny object of whatever technology it is, that they're using it and not functionally knowing what the hell it's actually doing.
right. And you're saying that from the recruiting side, from
Yeah.
the TA side? Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, first of all, what that's so dumb to like score someone and have that track across like that. It makes zero sense. It's like, hey, I'm going to try out for playing third base and then I can't like it's just silly to think that one scorecard on one position disqualifies you or even on the other side qualifies you for a certain job. So I imagine that people would have to use incognito mode now so it doesn't track or cache their activity. So that's interesting. I hadn't heard of that. And I know a lot of companies are using algorithms, and I'm not against that at all. I think a lot of it has been deployed with just like, here's the tech, have fun. And
Yeah.
I quote a lot, Kathy O'Neill, Weapons of Math Destruction. She also now does AI Skeptics podcasts. Like I love looking at the pessimists. And she called this. She's like, the algorithm is gonna have bias at scale. So I think you have to, and this is the position I take at Living HR, running this, this practice, the AI people solution practice, is you have to be thoughtful. You have to be like, what is your workflow? Where is AI really good at? And the idea that AI can score people, yes, that's where it's really good at, and it's probably better. Like, if listen, you've been in so many different functions and different companies, right? you know, let's be honest. Like when a manager looks at a resume or a LinkedIn profile, all the biases are in there. Like, especially I know, I worked with managers that were like, especially in engineering, that are like, if they didn't graduate from my university, they suck, like they didn't say those words, but so anyway, I think anything where AI could be advanceful there, but unless it's perpetuating that scale. So it's interesting, like, but that's one of the things
But
that I
I don't
taught.
think
Yeah.
I don't think it was it and you may say, of course, that's obvious, but I just want to be clear. It's not and I think that's the challenge. It's not doing it because it was necessarily instructed to do that intentionally. I think that's where a lot of times there are gaps in this context around same thing I'm hearing. Oh my gosh, in over the past maybe 5, as you know, I do workshops all the time, maybe 5 workshops I've done, I hear somebody in the room, and one of my last ones, I was in Utah, and there was a gentleman in there who, he just wants to leap into OpenClaw, right? He wants to buy his own servers and his own systems, and I was like, he asked questions about like 4 times, and the irony by the end, I was like, you and I should have a conversation about OpenClaw after the session because 90% of the rest of the room doesn't know what you're
Right.
talking.
Yeah. Yeah. You're the one person that's doing
Yeah,
open claw. Yeah.
but recognizing that there are there are these keeping up with the Joneses desires because at the same time people are talking about things like open claw, the other conversations I'm having with people are I just don't want to be left behind. I'm concerned as AI and technology starts coming up more and more in job interviews as the need to demonstrate my capabilities with AI, not just talk about prompting, but literally think through how have I implemented efficiencies through technology integration. Those questions people are really concerned about being able to answer. And
Sure.
at the same time, it's like one of the things I talk about in my workshops is like tools don't understand nuance. And, when your systems aren't clean and when your um, files aren't organized and when you give it direction like clean up a file, that's going to include things like deletions, eliminate, that you
Yeah.
can't get back because you can't work your way back through. And I think that's where, to your point, what you're trying to do, and I think both of us are trying to do in this effort to educate, streamline, inform, is that there's, these systems are incorporating bias, and it's not always because it was intended. It's because it's not able to track the nuance of, oh, well, we don't mean follow it for every job that comes into the system that's using you. We mean it just for this
Right.
one. And unless
Yeah.
we're intentional and think through it, I think that's really an interesting
Yeah.
challenge.
And even when you identify it, like make changes, right? That this is why human in the loop is so important for these efforts to be like, hey, okay, because on the other side, the flip side of this from a company perspective, you're missing out on all these people. They're getting disqualified for roles that maybe they're gonna kill in. They're gonna be incredibly performance, drive performance and be incredibly successful in creating incredible value for your company, and you're missing that stuff. So, I mean, I think the first understanding where you are, what's your readiness around these things, and then looking at it from an org design perspective, looking at it from a workflow. Like, let's look at the tasks. What are the different tasks? And it's the same thing that we did years ago when we looked at automation or offshoring. It's like, let's look at every task. Is this something that AI can do? Can it do well? Is there technology out there that can do this? And just being really thoughtful about it versus like, all right, we're just going to launch X software and then get sued and just so it's just again it all comes down to basics of change management and really being thoughtful
Mm,
about these things and when by the way when I want to be clear, like thoughtful is not a human. This is not like a soft idea. Like, this is not just like, oh, be thoughtful, be nice. No, it's actually being thoughtful to create business value, right? Like, that's it. At the end of the day, take a step back and ultimately we can help you build greater value. And that kind of stuff. So again, I know we're beating a somewhat of a dead horse here, but we have to continue to push this and make sure people are putting these things out. So anyway, I mean, it's interesting, this I wonder, to your point about, some of the folks that you're talking to who are delayed. A lot of what I see is an echo chamber of tech, and definitely a lot of the struggles are within tech. And I think a lot of companies looked at AI and paused hiring. And I think what we're going to start seeing, my prediction, or maybe the next quarter or two, given what we've just saw this breaking this morning about the jobs report, is maybe there's going to be people are going to wake up and go, all right, AI is not taking jobs. AI can't do all this stuff. Maybe we should start opening up and hiring people. Like I know, what I've been looking for, and you and I talked about this because we're the echo chamber is all the negative. Cognizant CEO was on Bloomberg TV recently. I actually have it on. It's always in the background. Hiring 20,000 people at this company, right? So I think the more people see that it is the equation, AI and people, or machines and people and humans, I think you're going to start seeing an opening up. Is it going to be like COVID? No, of course we're never going to go back there. You're going to build companies with less people and AI,
mhm,
but I think people, those that have paused, and I wrote this on LinkedIn this morning when I saw this jobs report, those that had paused are going to be behind. So if you were a CEO or a company that paused hiring, you are now falling behind. And so I
mm.
think we're going to start seeing a surge of more open jobs. I kind of hope.
it's interesting as you talked before, you mentioned, what are the future professionals in our world. We were talking about your own family, not to, I don't want to explode anything about your family that you don't want to share, but three kids,
All
one out
good.
of college, two in college, or one getting ready to go in. And it's interesting. My post yesterday was about the young man, who, of course, I can't remember his name because I have terrible memory. But the young man who put out that A24 Studios movie that just launched last weekend, youngest gentleman to have an opening weekend. He's 20 years old,
Oh, was
$181
this
million.
Obsession? The Obsession one? Is that?
Yeah, that's not the name of the movie. It starts with a B, but I can't remember the name of it
Oh,
right now.
Backrooms.
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 Thank you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
so when he was 14, he saw. So part of the reason I bring this up is because I also just finished out my semester teaching undergraduates. And my perception of what the future worker is going to look like, I think, is an important conversation because what we're talking about today, or what I hear people talking about more today, is this like staying rooted in the experience that myself as a Gen Xer had, millennials had, that is like, this is what we experienced. Oh my gosh, what is their life going to be like? Because it's not going to be the same thing that I had. And first of all, there's nothing to say that the way that I came up learning how to be a professional worker was the right way, right?
Right.
Jack Welch telling me that I needed to be the first one in the parking lot, the last one to leave, so that performatively a CEO could assume that I was working hard. Like I did that most of my career. I was just having a conversation with somebody else. I worked until 7 to 8 p.m. every day for 25 years of a career. And that's not necessarily the right way to do it. And I think
Right.
younger generations have had such a different life. This young man, for example, when he was 11, he got a computer and he was trying to update all these Minecraft modifications. So he kept breaking his computer and trying to fix it. By 14, he was building out his own systems and uploading his own YouTube videos. By 15, he saw a picture of a yellow room that seemed endless at 15. From that, he built out a 3D model of this space that just had no exit, of these yellow rooms. And that became the model that then got sold to Studio A24. And they gave him $10 million to build a movie. He did it on time with no delays, no extensions
Mm,
of budget. And its first opening weekend was $118 million globally. Like, the students that I
great
have,
return.
yeah, didn't do that. But every single one of them, as their final project, I gave them the requirement to build out a app that would either help support their own professional growth or that would be of service to their community, whatever that meant to them. The tools that these students built, every one of them is like, I want to work for 2 years and then I want to have my own business. Like, they're
Mm,
the gig solo multipreneur economy of, I just, I think there's such a space for the people like a daughter who gets a degree in finance and goes to work for a private equity firm or goes to for a big investment bank. And there's also the space for like, absolutely, I'm not going to go to school. What's the point? I'm already building, I'm already generating revenue. Like, so many
right.
people I've heard are like raising their kids to have small businesses. And you're like, holy shit. Like, and that's the world is just, and I think my point is, I think we're so mired in, this is what it was like for me. And I'm afraid they're not going to have it like that, and not thinking they don't need to have it like me. They need to have it their way and be facilitated through what this is going to look like in their life.
Yeah.
How do you support a young talent that is going into a work world where they already have to understand how to leverage the technology, how they are building the technology, in fact, to do the work themselves. So,
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting. I love that story. I didn't see. I know my kids went to go see Backrooms. I'm not a big horror movie person. Poltergeist scared the crap out of me. as a kid. And then, by the way, so I watched Poltergeist, and you remember the big tree thing that I don't know if you've ever seen it, but a tree comes alive or whatever it is and sucks the kid. Like, so I at that time, like I watched Poltergeist, scared the crap out of me. And then there was a big hurricane, and a neighbor's shed came into my window. So now I'm like tree, shed, whatever. Like I'm like
Oh,
shitting
wow.
bricks as a kid. So I do not like horror movies at all. I don't understand the brain science behind horror movies and why people like even like haunted houses, like the jump scare. I just don't get it. I just like who it's like self-torturing. Like, why would you want to put yourself through that? Anyway, so I don't watch horror movies, but my kids do, and good for them. Great. I don't watch horror movies. So, but I love this story because I think what it exemplifies and what's going to be a custom norm, and I am all for it because listen, I didn't graduate from an Ivy League. I don't come from legacy. I don't have any of that stuff. And so what we're seeing now is a transition from the idea that anyone, and listen, there's an advantage. I think most of the advantages for an Ivy League education is not only the education. Education is probably secondary. It's the network. It's the people that you meet. And this is why I support my kids going to larger schools, recognizable schools. It's Professor Galloway talks about it as a luxury item now. College is now a luxury item. So there's advantages there without a doubt. But we're going towards what I always believe to be where it's outcome based. It's outcome based employment. Can you do this? I don't care if you went to Yale, and in fact, you might not be getting the education at a larger institution because they move like battleships. I need someone that knows this stuff clean. I need someone that knows how to do digital marketing. And so I don't care where you graduated from. Can you prove to me that you can do or have these skills? And what is the outcome? At the end of the day, if are you driving more revenue? Are I'm thinking of digital marketing, but more
Yeah.
qualified leads, that kind of stuff. And so that's a perfect example. Here's a kid that actually did shit. And he was like, here, like I tried this myself with the Ella project where I was like, I created a comic book and I said, here, Netflix, I created the comic book. I have all the characters. Here it is. I mean, they didn't buy it, but it would have been nice to get a $10 million fee for Ella. But it was the outcome base. And I think that's where we're going to. And I am super excited about that. That is and if it results in someone's business or, they want to create a business, I think the one thing that could potentially have a entrepreneurial renaissance would be, healthcare, right? Like government sponsored healthcare, because a lot of people don't go into their own businesses because they don't have access to affordable
1,000%.
healthcare. So I think if we did that, again, I don't know the math behind it. I know there's economics behind giving everyone medical, but that would be a less thing to worry about. And I think it's probably the biggest friction point. So I'm excited about this new, like this ways of working that is outcome based, skill based, and it's not necessarily based on your pedigree.
So so one thing that came up, and I was running a learning event for Fraser Jones, a recruiting firm. Great friend Erica Ravitch works there. Um, in the conversation after the fact, something that came up was a gentleman came up and said, "I think the thing we're not talking about. It's great to talk about use of technology and the the logistics and practical use and fluency. But what I don't think we're talking about enough is like, what is the workplace going to look like in a few years? Like, do we think that there's going to be, I hear you on the outcome based. My perspective is that it's going to be, you know, the conversation is going to be similar to yours, outcome project driven, skills based. Um, we'll have technology to look at candidates through a different lens beyond a piece of paper and a LinkedIn profile, but really get deeper analytics on skill set, um, capabilities, uh, interests. And by looking at those three metrics in a different way, maybe people are taking on very different jobs, not just because it's what I went to school for, but it's what I built,
Yeah.
what I've created, what I added into my education and my experience and my unique way of thinking. I'm going to tackle this project driven thing instead of being focused on, like, here's the job description that's very general and the projects may fluctuate.
Yeah.
Um, but what I asked him was, like, what are the questions you think we should be asking? And maybe I'd like to pose that to you. Like, what are the deep conversations? You're now with Living HR, talking about the world of the future of work with clients and partners. And what are the questions that you feel like maybe should be asked, but aren't being asked around what the world of work is shifting to?
I think we're starting to see this, and actually, one of our partners, Hibob, put out some interesting information. They have some modules that they're launching very soon around skills. So I think it's a skills conversation. When I moved from 15.5 to Living HR, the last couple of days of 15.5, I actually went into Claude because all my systems are connected there, and I said, "Tell me what I did over the last year." Look through all these different systems and then infer skills from create a list of skills that you can infer based on the actual activity, not a LinkedIn certification or a referral or a SHRM, whatever they call those points.
Certificates.
Yeah, SHRM certificate. It was actually based on now, of course, you got to be careful, human in the loop. It will hallucinate, it'll infer that, because maybe I sent out an email that I'm now an email marketer. But the idea is like, so I think the world of work is going back to what you're just talking about. It's skills and it's proof of those skills. And now the challenge with that one is if we apply that kind of methodology, and there's no place. By the way, I talked to this guy, this really interesting entrepreneur, very successful, like just loves creating stuff. And what he was building was almost like what Facebook is doing to their employees, which is monitoring, which is a really nefarious, like, oh my, like, I know we talked about this. Like, by the way, the AFL CIO president is talking about AI now. So it's great that the unions are getting involved and looking at this stuff. But like he was creating something for the individual to be able to monitor what you do on a computer. And then they say, hey, I see that you do this work in HubSpot, like, or, like I'm inferring that you have this email marketing skill. And again, if you're in HubSpot and you're looking at the results and it's driving MQLs, like, so to me, I think it's this move from this pedigree based BS on a LinkedIn or this assumption that you have these skills to more of like, do you actually like, like there was name that tune a game show years ago and is like, I can name that tune in 3 notes, and the
Yeah.
person's like, yeah, go ahead, name that. Like, it's the version of name that tune that's like, oh, you know how to do this work, prove it, like,
Yeah.
show me the money kind of thing. And there's going to be technology that supports that. I could think like, what I talked to the high bob folks about is like, hey, connect to all the different business systems and you don't need to have people input skills, which is, whenever we try to do skills in HR, no one fills it out. How do we know, like they put in this skill and we know it's bullshit, or are they beginner, intermediate? I'm like, what if AI can be, at least get you to version one of that kind of stuff? So that's where I think these things are going. It's the actual skills. Prove it to me that you've done this. And then people are going to be hired based on that kind of thing. We just need, LinkedIn to have this kind of common because we're gonna need to certify this in some way. We're gonna need to confirm it in some way. But I think that's where it's going. This future of work. Like, can you actually do it? Name that tune.
Yeah. I love, first of all, love that show. I would have
Yeah,
killed on that show. We need to bring that back. Um,
they tried. I think there was one.
did
I
they?
forget, like Chelsea Handler. When
Oh,
I think she hosted a bunch. I don't know if it was named that tune. Somebody did. Like I remember somebody hosting, and I think it was named that. Or yeah, it was something. Maybe it was a whatever the modern version of it. But I think there was something years
so
ago.
my husband and I sort of play. We have two games that we play when we're driving in the car. One is like movie guessing. So you come up with a movie in your head. and the other person has to just ask questions to try to figure out what movie it is. So it could be like, okay, what's the genre? When year was it created? What's the time frame? Is it about main characters? Are any of those characters still alive? Are they popular? So you go through this like series of
Sure.
questions. And then other times we play like the kind of a name that tune, and we'll just go through. Usually it's probably rap of like, okay, what's this one? And like, do you know all the
Okay.
lyrics? But I think when it comes to in terms of skills, the thing that's riding through my head right now, and this is like probably a book in the making, but what is the what does the work, not just like what is the hiring process and what are we, but like if you were to craft a company for the future today, what would that architecture look like? How would you architect that company? And would you, especially if you're working as myself, a solopreneur, you are working for every dollar you make, and every dollar goes to somewhere, if not to your, to continue to grow the business. How are we leveraging external talent, technology, and really honing in not on the we're going to hire W-2s because we've always W-2s is just what we do. And we're actually going to hire for project based growth intention and initiatives, uh, finite periods of time with re-up opportunities. So we're going maybe back to a more contract based work experience, focusing in on, I love you talking about skills, because I've actually been a fan of, Corn Ferry's competency model. I personally really have used that in the past. I really like it. By the way, Corn Ferry is not endorsing this podcast, although we would love to have a conversation about it. Um, but there's this really interesting thing happening. It's almost like comparative to what's happening with AI. That's like everybody's using AI, but nobody's really leveraging it well. We talk about moving to skills based, but companies can't even seem to get the like a lot of companies really struggle with even just basic what are our objectives? What are the goals for the year? How are we tracking them? How are we ensuring that they're getting completed? How are we holding people accountable when they don't? How are we creating space? And so that might be my limited purview. Maybe you have a different impression where you might say, oh my gosh, I've worked with companies that do phenomenally well with their goals and building objectives out and achieving those objectives on an annualized basis, whatever. But I think there's so much, while we at the same time we're focusing on what does the future of work look like, it feels like we're so behind because companies struggle with the change in the first place, with everything that could be coming.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like I no, I agree. And I wrote I'll have to look on LinkedIn when I published this, but I wrote probably I want to say 10, 12 years ago, because I think I was at Razorfish. I was like, we're gonna like work is gonna be time shared. Like it's gonna be
Mm.
fractional. Because I think if you have and you spawn an idea, like I would go in to any company because now you have these AI systems like Claude that connects to all your different business tools. And I would start looking at what is necessary to create the outcomes. And by the way, no company has done, I mean, maybe Google, when they published their OKR framework, they were the only one. And then everyone's like, yeah, we're going to do that. And like, it just, no, the
It
problem is,
launches and it fell flat. Yeah.
oh my, I've never done it well. And in fact, I had a young associate at Suzy. And if he listens to this, he'll know who he is. I'm not calling out by name, but he's like, "Yeah, we should do OKRs." I'm like, "I am not going to stand in your way, but it's never going to work." And he tried it, and it didn't, because it's just too dynamic. Things move too quickly to be like, "Hey," and like we have OKRs, we have revenue goals, we have profitability goals. That's not changing. That's board directed. And then all the other things that get you there are dynamic because things move so quickly and change so quickly. So that's my position on goals. And it's hard to track them. And then when they change, and like it's just a cluster. Now with AI, could you potentially go into your business tools and get all that stuff? Yes. And we were exploring that in a past role. But on your point here, I think we could probably go into, if we can get aggregate data, like if I'm at Claude and I have all company data because you're connecting to everything, I could probably give the AI a prompt to be like, "Hey, what does a company need to operate?" And I would be interested to see what comes out of that versus how we've constructed companies. Do I need a full-time accounts receivable person? Do I need a full-time accounts payable person? And do I need a full-time recruiter? Of course, human judgment is like, hey, yes and no, right? That's,
Yeah.
so I think it would be interesting
But I think that,
exercise to go
sorry to
through.
interrupting,
Good. Yeah.
Anthony, I think the key word that you use there is the full time,
Yeah.
right? Because I first of all, I love the time shared work. That's going to go in the book, which I'm going to start writing as of
Uh,
minutes ago, because I love this idea that, you know, any more the unwritten contract between employer employee in the context of taking care of a worker as they age, as they embark on retirement, as we go through difficult periods. I think this past 5 years, 6 years since COVID will go down in the analogs of history in 100 years from now as this very pivotal point of change around what is actually needed within a company, how people work most effectively, the technology that's advanced that allows us to communicate in ways that just didn't exist before, the technology that can now link systems together that could not be linked before, and the storyline that we've been hearing in the news for the past year of big companies laying off thousands and thousands and thousands of people, the employee contract, if you will, of I take care of you, you take care of my business, and we both succeed is eliminated. I can't imagine people not thinking in the next 3 years, every single person should be a polypreneur and have
yeah.
multiple streams of income. And so if that means I'm going to work with this. And I think, unfortunately, if we had healthcare and we had those things, we would have even fewer people that wanted to stay connected to as a W-2 or as a full-time person because
Yep.
there's just the cost of health is just not possible without it.
And if you think about like the opportunity here, like there's a tech opportunity to make that connection. I know work market, a friend of mine launched that, and that was kind of conceptually like this fractional workspace, mostly on IT. But I can almost see like I go to AI and say, hey, I need a person that's a specialist in this, and in fact, Anthony will pop up on that, even though my title is chief people officer, is because I have
Exactly.
experience with that. And then you just
Exactly.
grab a portion of my time because it's all public data and like, hey, I need Anthony for 8 hours a week. I'm gonna like a timeshare. Like I'm gonna go. I want to go to Hawaii, and I'm gonna go stay in a nice place. And by the way, I know the thing about time sharing, and there's flaws in it too. You know what you're getting, right? Like there's a level of like, okay, this is Marriott, and so I know what I'm getting. It's the same experience. This is why hotels still exist even though we have Airbnbs because you just know going there of what that experience. And by the way, on the negative side too, like, oh yeah, I'm not going to stay at that hotel because I know that experience. But I think that time sharing, and I was trying to look for it. I was doing a Google search and I couldn't find it, so I'll go back. But the idea is like, and when do you need that, and how like that? To me, to your point, that's the future of work. And so now, if you take that forward, if like the other challenge I have with this and that I'm concerned about is like our communities, we're more dispersed in terms of our communities. We don't go to church, and these religious institutions are declining in attendance. So what we have created over the past bunch of years is that connection of work to work, that connection to
Mm,
people to work. And so if
yeah.
that goes away, right? If you're just a fractional person and you're popping into companies, what happens, to connection? Like, listen, you and I were in HR and we would always frown upon corporate relationships, mostly if you're the boss, but a lot of people got married because they met at work. And so,
I I I was talking to somebody that I used to work with at at News America Marketing, division of News Corp. I worked there for 15 years. We had a huge college recruitment program. We're bringing around 150 to 200 new recent college graduates, great schools. And we were talking about how many marriages came from that. And so, like, because of that early experience, the only caveat is you need to disclose, and there can't be a reporting structure. But I think that,
Right.
especially for young people, that was so many of those people that started at that company still remain my friends. They still remain one another's friends because that was the social circle. But I don't
Sure.
necessarily think that that's where the social circle has to be. I was thinking about a friend the other day who has young children, and how they go so out of their way to make sure that there are opportunities for those children to play and interact and have play dates and the scheduling and all the stuff. And as we get into these as we graduate from college, where for many of us that went to college still had that same, the social circle was who were the people that were, if you were in Greek life or you were in some other organization, or it was just the people that lived in your dorm, or it was the people that were in your classes, and there were
Right.
these like forced opportunities to meet with other people. And then once you get out and you're starting work, it goes back to maybe some of those old rules of like, you got to be working all the time, put in the hours.
Sure.
And so I think there's maybe I think as I'm getting older, this my mind is really rejecting the formula of what it looks like to do anything in a formulaic way. Like,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
can look very different. The socialization can come from different places, and the way that, I'm sure kids today who there are probably a lot of kids that went to school during COVID that felt very disconnected, but there's probably a huge proportion that feel even more connected because of the way social media has blown up. And that's what their experience has been. So I know I'm kind of
Yeah.
a broken record on this idea of like experiences are going to differ and shift. And what my grandparents experienced when they were growing up is completely different than my lifetime. And that's going to be different from your kid's lifetime. But I
Yeah.
think from a perspective of the work world, how we are in a time right now to be asking the questions that are going to create, or as I don't know what I, like, we're manifesting it, like, as we're living it.
Sure. And it's hard, like the existing, like if you think of every company that is being built today, it's very similar. Like it's like I need, a CEO, a co-founder, sometimes it's a technical co-founder, and then they go out and their first hire typically, or their first thought is like, okay, finance. Oh, and then we need HR, and now we need marketing, and now we need,
Yeah.
like, it's this sort of like you could probably, depending, HR is always last, by the way, which is
And
ridiculous.
it's not even
Um,
HR, it's a recruiter
yeah, yeah, office manager.
with a fancy title. Yeah.
Yeah, chief of staff, whatever it is. Uh but it's kind of, similar formula, and I think that's what changes. I think you're gonna start thinking about, okay, yes, I do need these functions. I don't think it's wrong, but the question is, like, when do I need these functions? And because there's gonna be a world where you can activate those functions whenever you want to activate them and deactivate them when you need them, um, it's that's gonna take a while because again, we're familiar with the construct, why change what that looks like, and there's really no technology. I mean, LinkedIn would be perfect for this, but there is no technology to basically turn it on. I know there's some fractional communities and things like that, but I think there's definitely an opportunity there to build a technology that allows people to be like, hey, I'm going to just expose my hours. I have these skills, they're
Yeah.
confirmed, like all that kind of stuff.
I like the idea of doing it, of developing a system that really helps, because it goes back to what you were saying before. Like, it's not about the job titles you've had, it's about the experiences and the actual interactions and outputs, and you used that word before, that we have, that would give that indication. Because I think about my dad, for example. My dad worked his entire life as a tool and die maker for General Motors and then for Saturn car companies. Anybody who remembers Saturn out in the world.
Yeah.
Um, and he was great working with his hands, but he could be offered a job doing management. He could be offered doing a job or a project on um, project integration, on uh, technical evaluation, on uh, as a PMO. Like there are so many different titles, and I think that's where we're very mired in that space right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, anything else you want to, any new additional hot takes you want to share as we cap off this recent episode, my friend?
Hot takes. I mean, there's just so many, with everything that's going on. I mean, it's going to be a real interesting year with all the AI IPOs, SpaceX. I just have this love hate relationship with SpaceX and what they're doing there. I just like as a innovator, like I'm like it's wonderful. I could see Starlink, this massively growing internet, satellite company, disrupting. Like I'm so excited about it, and yet it's not so excited about it for a bunch of different things. But yeah, it's going to be really fun. I mean, I'm excited that we launched this because we're going to have so much to talk about because there's just so much happening in the world of business.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm. Let's keep it going.
Yes, 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 yes. All right. Until next time, my friend, I'll talk to you next week.
See you soon.